these snowbirds that just are here for 6 months. That's good.
That's great. That's great. Do any of those folks contribute at all while they're not here? Yes, sir. Hi.
Would you like me and Dave to do the collection?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Stewart, Florida, if you weren't sure of that. Today's October 23rd. My name is Richard Granite, and I want to assure you that we are a welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all genders, all ethnicities, ages, and backgrounds. And of course, it's wonderful to see all our vaccinated members. I need to put my glasses on. It's so much better. It's so much easier.
Is it still wonderful to see?
When I can see. We are on YouTube. To be put on our email list, go to our website and just indicate that. Note on the bottom a request for an online newsletter also. Visitors, if you're comfortable, please step up to the microphone. I see so many people that I'm pretty much a newbie, and I know there's a lot of people here that are back from up north. But if there's any people new that would be willing to come up and introduce yourselves, any visitors? Okay. Let me share some announcements with you. Join us on the first and third Tuesdays at Stewart Veterans Memorial Park downtown at noon for the brown bag lunch. I admit that I haven't been there yet, but I intend to. Let's see, we have Reverend Bob does current events on Friday. Let's see, John's got his book club on Wednesdays. New book, right? Just starting? Let's see. Fred is doing a turkey for November 20th, and Pam's has he done a turkey before? I was wondering the applause. I mean, excellent. Sounds wonderful. Yes, ma'am. And no, not at all. And Pam, you have a list, right? People sign up with you for what you'd like to bring. Let's see. I don't want to forget this. If you'll notice out in the, what do you call that, the room out there? There's a special term for that. Yes, thank you. There's some posters or we have a relative to the concert that's going to be November 4th. It's a wonderful blues band. And of course, anything that's raised, any donations or tips that are given will go to hurricane relief. And of course, it's being sponsored by the church. Let's see. Okay. I want to thank those of you that helped with the service. Of course, Jackie, for our music, our greeters and ushers, Parina, and our tech wizard, Chris McGahan, Joanne Leon and Marguerite Gregory for the coffee and cookies in the patio. And I guess we're ready for our prelude.
When you tell me. Let's just do that.
That's certainly the way to begin, isn't it? Let's see. Okay. Time to light the chalice, I guess, Bob. When I think of our chalice, I think of the need for matches. Oh, there, no.
We're good. Consider yourself lit.
Lit, thank you. Normally we think in terms of the purposes of our church and so forth. I think also of the chalice as being representative of our broader communities and our democracy that seems to be so fragile right now. And I'd like to share with you I don't have a reading, but what I wrote. And the question that Bob wanted me to deal with was to ask, is it time for a refresher course on our Constitution? And if there ever was a time, it certainly is now. I think I need to start maybe just give you a little background to the Constitution and to the writing of the Constitution. The first years in our country, the colonies were governed by the Continental Congress, or the states were rather. It was sort of like a league of friendship. It had no real power. In fact, the Revolutionary Army, not George Washington's army, he had to request funds because Congress couldn't tax. They had no powers, basically. When at the conclusion of the Revolutionary War, it was obvious that there was a need for change. The Articles of Confederation, the first sort of constitution, was ratified in 1781, but it also it was a confederation. It was a league of independent states. And also they couldn't tax. And they could simply request money. They couldn't deal with interstate commerce or any issues that we expect government to deal with. It was ratified in 1781 and lasted through the Revolutionary War. Shays' Rebellion that we've mentioned before, a rebellion of farmers in western Massachusetts because they didn't want to pay taxes. And farmers were losing their properties, their farms, because of those taxes. All of these things led to a call for a convention originally to revise the Articles of Confederation. And of course, this was led by James Madison, who became known as the father of the Constitution. They met in Philadelphia. 74 delegates were invited, 55 attended. Only 12 of the 13 states sent anyone. Rhode Island wouldn't send anyone. Most of the delegates were well schooled in the legal principles, the concepts of government as expanded by Montesquieu and John Locke. Separation of powers and things of that nature. This is something that maybe our former president never kind of got to. John Locke, that was Montesquieu. John Locke's concepts related to natural law and the fact that our rights are God-given. They're not given by government. When they met, most people have described the meetings, well, they were hidden, the meetings were carried on behind closed doors. Everyone else was locked out. There was a whole range of different ideas about the nature of government. You had large states like New York, Virginia, that had their views, and you had small states like New Jersey or Rhode Island. But they eventually led to a series of compromises, and sometimes we call them a bundle of compromises. Large states, well, there were three compromises. There was the Great Compromise that created a bicameral legislature, a Senate which was originally chosen by state legislatures, and a House of and a House that was chosen by people. There was issues over slavery. Southern states wanted their slaves counted. Northern states didn't, and that led to the 3/5 compromise. And of course, there was a compromise, the Connecticut Compromise, which called for the popular election of members of the House and a Senate which was, what did I say, popular election by the state legislature, excuse me, and a Senate and a House of Representatives chosen by the people. Well, what do we have? What did we end up with? We ended up with when you think of the Constitution, you can kind of think of it sort of similar to like a book, okay? There's a preamble, which is an introduction, which states the purposes, form a more perfect union, et cetera, and so forth. And then there's 7 articles, which are like chapters. And the first 3 chapters created our 3 branches of government. The judicial branch obviously is in the forefront right now. We've had periodically both passive and active courts. This court is extremely active. We've had courts that were active in promoting more liberal positions, especially on the rights of criminals. Excuse me, we've had courts in this court, This court is the first court to take away constitutional guarantees. We've had other courts which have changed former decisions, but there's a concept called stare decisis, which is basically that new decisions, current decisions, usually are based on the laws or the concepts passed by previous courts. Our judicial branch is in the Constitution. It's the shortest of all the sections of the Constitution. The Constitution only created a Supreme Court, serving for life, under good behavior, perhaps. And all the other courts would be created by Congress. Some of the other articles of special interest, like the full faith and credit clause, I wonder, for example, if the state of Texas, as it approaches the idea of whether or not they could prosecute people who leave the state to go to another state for an abortion. Because the full faith and credit clause says that each state must give full faith and credit to the rules, the regulations, the procedures, the laws of other states. On Article 5, developed the process of amending the Constitution. Of course, there's the first 10 amendments that are the Bill of Rights, and then the others that have followed, 27 total. The process is, obviously, it's not something done it's a difficult process. It takes 2/3 of the states or of members of Congress to propose, and then 3/4 of the states to accept. In terms of the amendments to the Constitution, there are some that obviously are more significant than others. 4 of the original Bill of Rights dealt with those persons accused of crimes. And the Bill of Rights originally was established to protect people against the abuse by the national government, not the states. That was the concern then. But since, as a result of other amendments to the Constitution and court decisions, most of them have been expanded to include protections against state. Let's see, the Civil War amendments, the 14th especially, which expanded the rights of due process, and no mention of women in that, but still, extended the rights of due process to protections against the states, due process of law. In other words, you can't lose your property, your life, your freedom without a trial by jury. Let's see. I don't want to put you to sleep. You know what?
Let me interrupt you, and let me tell you, when Richard and I met to plan this, I told him polarization is a breakdown of our country, and what we needed was more civics. And I told him it was his fault. He's a retired civics teacher, and this was his opportunity.
It's a heavy burden.
It was a heavy burden. But I have to say, Richard, if your lesson goes on, they're going to hope that's the sermon.
No, I'd really-
And that's
I'm
not,
ready.
and that, that's, never mind,
I'm
Ronnie.
ready to,
Let's get to the singing.
yeah, I'm ready to
No,
wrap it up. I really
You
am.
wrap it up and announce the hymn.
All right, let's, I really didn't know exactly how I wanted to deal with this, as you can see. All right, let's see, okay. All right, we're ready. Let's have our first hymn. Let me put my glasses on, and that's going to be hymn 131. Yes, thank you, Jackie.
Peace has tried us, hope inside us,
Will lead the way.
thousands you can be from deep within you. You can change the world
With your love,
guide us.
peace has tried us. Let us recite our affirmation. Speaking the first verse and singing the second through our masks. I guess not through our masks. We don't wear masks. Love is the spirit of this church.
And service is its laws. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace,
To seek the truth in love and to help one another.
from all that dwell below the skies. Let faith and hope
And love
arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung from
every land by every tongue. Amen. Okay.
Now it's my turn. This is our time to share matters of joy or sorrow or concern, hoping that as we hear each other's burdens or joys, we all know that we are heard and supported. I always ask that you keep them personal and keep them brief. I'm reminded lately, I guess because of the losses in Pat Burt's life, that we're in a time of grief for people, a lot of grief. And I don't know that we ever have time to talk about that and share that enough. I wonder if we should be offering services for groups to basically focus on that. I mentioned Pat because she's lost Joe, her husband, and she just recently lost her little darling, Ginger. And we know what pets mean to us. I mentioned to somebody once that I had lost my mother and my cat, and they said, "You realize you just mentioned your mother and your cat in the same sentence?" Yes, I realized that, and that person didn't know how deeply in love I was with both of those people and what they did for me. Wow. Anyway, not to go on. Who has a matter of joy or sorrow that you will come to the mic or from your seat to share?
Hi, I'm Fred. I have a sorrow that I will not be here next week because I'm going to be celebrating my grandson's 22nd birthday up in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and I'm going to stay there through Halloween, and I'm going to go as Frederick the Pretty Bad Wizard with a cape and a hat, so I'm looking forward to that. And also, I want a correction. I want to put a little Florida spin on Thanksgiving this year. So instead of cooking turkeys, I'm going to cook sandhill cranes, okay?
Fred, I hope you're kidding. We have neighbors. Go ahead, Judy.
I'm Judy. Very quickly, a joy and a concern. A joy that I got to meet this lovely family. I got to accompany Linda to that, to meet them, and it was, I speak Spanish, so it was, they're lovely people, and they deserve all the help we can give them. Another joy is the Tai Chi classes are going well, and I just would like to put that out there that, it's still happening on Fridays. Okay, the joy and concern. I'm putting myself out there, because, let's see, a couple of weeks ago, I boldly and probably foolishly ran over to the piano because Jackie, I think, was sick that day or something.
Judy, generously.
Yes, and so, I've had performance anxiety all my life, called on to perform a lot of different venues, but it makes me very nervous. But my wanting to serve my church, and because Bob asked me, I have committed to playing at one of the services when Jackie won't be here. And oh my God, here we got this marvelous musician here, and Bruce, who's a marvelous pianist, and we had Jim Rickson before, and so it's a challenge for me. But if I can't put myself out there with, with this beloved community, then when would it happen, right? So anyway, I love you all. So, thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Oh, stones, yes. Freedom. Family.
13th, they won't be here.
Yeah, we've got that all set up now. Okay.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is AJ Weldon here, I think. And a joy for Marianne and I both. Speaking of pets, we had met in a park walking our dogs somewhere around 23 years ago. But 23 years ago today, we were married. And actually, we were married in a Unity church. And she was a UU, and she came over to the Unity church for the service that we had. But it's 23 years ago this morning. and that's a joy for both.
Great, AJ.
Not on the rocks. This is on the screen.
I have a couple of joys. I met my great niece for the first time, my 5-month-old great niece. Her and her parents came and stayed with us for a few days, and that was just lovely. It was just a joy. And then yesterday, I have a friend, a really good friend from down here, and her daughter I've known since she was 6 years old, and we had lunch together. Her and her husband moved to New Zealand, and we had lunch together. She's now 50, and so that was a real joy. So it's just great great how like the little things kind of light up your life. So.
Pam?
Hello, my name is Pam. My joy and concern is that in my arrogance, I think I know everything about COVID. And so I watch TV, I listen to other people, and I look things up. I don't know a damn thing about COVID, all right? And so I got my booster shot, and in my booster shot was on Monday. I was gonna have cocktails, go to bed, because everybody knows it knocks you out. Nothing happened. Got the booster shot, 4 o'clock, energy, nothing. Second day, every bone in my body ached. Okay, every bone in my body ached. You don't know. It's a very tricky situation, disease, virus, everything you want to call it. It is tricky. The second thing is, I would like to thank Jerry Rader. Does everybody know Jerry? Raise your hand. I needed retirement advice, and I went to what I consider the smartest people in the church, our minister, and I went and asked Jerry, what do you think? Should I go? Should I not go? And Jerry told me his story. There are some very smart people in this church. Thank you, Jerry.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Jackie, and I have 2 joys and 1 sorrow. First joy is that yesterday one of my students was a finalist in Palm Beach Orchestra competition and won $2,500, which is a lot more than I used to win. The sorrow is that, well, it's a joy that Gail McCarthy is back out of the hospital and out of rehab, but her body is sort of, she's fighting for her life because there's different things. So she is now in assisted living over at Addington Place if anybody wants to visit, and her dog is back with her. So I got to walk Athena yesterday. And the third joy is that my brother-in-law is being honored on November 3rd at the Lyric Theater, the Martin Arts Council. He's getting a Lifetime Achievement Award for his work in the arts, and I actually made the cut, so I'm nominated for a Marty, and I have to go to this thing too. So.
Before I forget. This week I went down to Fort Lauderdale, where I moved from 2.5 years ago, to visit with a former colleague of mine. I've known her for 25 years, and she's one of the most honest, sincere travel agents I know. I'm a travel agent. And the reason I went down to visit her is to ask her to join me in the business that I have. And the reason I want to do that is because I want a transition plan, which is something you have to do in the travel business. And so I wanted to partner so I could retire, so I'd have more time for music and the church, which will happen hopefully soon. And we met together, and we're doing it, and I'm just so excited to have such a wonderful person. She's a single mother. She's joining a business. It's a big risk for her, so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure she succeeds. So it's a big event in my life, and thanks for letting me share.
Good. Thank you, John. Anyone else? Okay, Janet, will you move a stone for those who haven't spoken but carry something, and we want them to know we know that. The meditation will be this by Richard Fuchs in the back of our hymnal. We lift up our hearts in thanks. For the sun and the dawn, which we did not create, for the moon and the evening, which we did not make, for food which we plant but cannot grow, for friends and loved ones who have not earned and we have not earned and cannot buy, for this gathered community, which welcomes us as we are, from wherever we have come, for all our free churches that keep us human and encourage us in our quest for beauty, truth, and love, for all the things which come to us as gifts of being from sources beyond ourselves, gifts of life and love and friendship. We lift up our hearts in thanks this day. And now some moments of silence. And now the hymn is 123, Spirit of Life. We hum the verse, we sing the verse, 123. Well, we hope whenever you come here, you experience generosity. And we want you to know that we certainly need yours. And now the morning offering will be received. Is there a volunteer to go along with Fred? Bless you, Dave. Some of us are old enough to remember Monty Python. And a common line from Monty Python was, and now for something completely different. Well, this next video is that, I chose it because of its youth and energy and joy, and be sure to appreciate the animal impressions.
Night. Enjoy. We go him away. We go him away.
A whim away, 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 a whim
Well, my joy is equal to theirs when I see our snowbirds come marching in. And that Judy in the back over there said the magic word, 6 months. Yay, great. And also, we have some fairly newish people here today. Whenever we do, I always want to say that if you're curious about the principles of UU, who wouldn't be, 7 pages, not marked, but 7 pages into the hymnal, they're listed there. if your mind wanders during the sermon, which I'm sure it can't. It won't, sure. Things we could lose. First, democracy. Before I risk slipping into hair on fire mode, 2 news nuggets recently warmed and calmed in needed places, and I hope they do for you what they do for me. Aaron Judge, home run 62, took me back to heroes of old for upstate New York grade school kids, Mantle, Maris, Mays, and Duke Snyder. My best bud in that era loved the Dodger Duke. When they replayed that clip of Maris teammates having to coax him from the dugout to accept the applause and praise of the roaring crowd in the stands when he muscled past the great Babe Ruth and hit number 61. It was a reminder of a time and day of modesty, even in the face of great historical achievement. Judge's home run 62 seemed in the Maris mode. There may be mitigating factors, how many games in the season, but so long as they are not performance-enhancing drugs, the 62 is just darn impressive. And Bill Nelson, head of NASA, seemed to hit an even bigger and far more consequential home run with that experimental asteroid strike that changed the asteroid's course. Nelson just beamed, "We can save the planet." Wow. A pretty great accomplishment in a time when government has more things to fix than we have confidence in them fixing. Proud of our former senator. Maybe you also read this week that China has armies of drones ready to attack wildfires. Could we rent them out? Where are ours? We surely have the fires. So we savor Nelson's and NASA's great moment. Now, if like me, you lie awake at night wondering what you should be worried about, asteroids aren't as big on that list as they once were. But America's democracy is. Our founders knew that government by and for the people could only work by checks and balances, separation of powers, respected boundaries between state and federal governments, and no established religion. They knew about the blood-drenching wars of Europe between Catholic and Protestant. The founders were flawed for sure, but brilliant and disproportionately Unitarian in all honesty and humility. That brilliance has to come majorly from their religious connection. What they crafted has lasted for 2 centuries plus. Through foreign attacks, England in 1812, Al-Qaeda in 2011, through a bloody civil war, and through world wars. Who would have thought or imagined that power-hungry partisans would opt for political power over our rich constitutional heritage and our founders' vision? And who could possibly have foreseen that blacks, Asian Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, LGBTQs aren't the minority. Sorry, but my needle could get stuck here. They aren't the minority we have to worry about. They fought for their due share of humanity, of power. They still are fighting for their share. They want their share, not to shut others out. I hasten to say, it may sound like I am partisan here and have only one target in mind. But any party or rabble-rouser could play to grievance and woo us, or enough of us, away from constitutional protections for all. And that's what has happened. We can't say we have a reliable two-party system anymore. A system of two political parties with competing economic views and competing visions of America's place and obligations among the nations. It could be either or any party that could jeopardize our constitutional past and future. So many military chiefs have had the courage to say, "You don't swear an oath to a leader." And any leader who wants such is not about to protect what he or she was elected to protect. The label could change, so we have to be smarter than that. I hope to heavens we are. The Democrats had Huey Long, Kingfish Huey Long, governor, then senator from Louisiana, who had a plan for America with him on top, but an assassin kept him from challenging FDR in 1936. And we remember George Wallace, Democrat and Methodist. Populist heroes come in all labels. There are things I would rather talk about because I try to talk about things that I know something about, or at least a little something, at least have read up on, or in an emergency Googled. Google now rewards my visits with, "Shouldn't you be contributing something?" I don't know enough in the following matters, but they keep me up or awake. So I hope enough solid legislators will craft a package to prevent these and more. A group of partisans were allowed to take over an Arizona county's voting machines and do we know not what to them for about 6 months. I never read of any watchdog organization watching these so-called patriots. How could the state or federal government not have protections in place to keep anyone's hands off such vital machines? When you go to vote, I think early voting starts here Wednesday. When you go to vote, partisan placards and partisan people have to be so far from the machines. But after the vote, have at them? What harm could there be? What harm could mischievous, power-hungry partisans pull off? And how can we not have law enforcement protecting election workers and responding effectively to the families of election workers being threatened? Many of you saw that young black woman at one of the hearings sobbing through her pride at such an opportunity in Georgia, an opportunity for her to help an election come off. And then her dismay at her mother and grandmother being threatened. For what? She said her grandmother knew about the lynching history of the South and a white mob at her door. Will we need military presence around polling places in the future, like next week or next month? And we have heard of fake electors signed on to challenge those who are supposed to vote for the winner of their district or area. Apparently, there were plenty of alternative electors ready to challenge the certified or to be certified lists of electors. And the plan was, if there were enough challenges, then the state legislators got to decide, not the vote tallies in the states. Most state legislators belong to one party. The original Jerry Falwell was smart back in the 80s to announce that the key to political control are the school boards, which can ban books and shrink or enlarge young minds, and state legislatures, which have plenty to do with the elections, like gerrymandering districts. Definition of gerrymandering: political manipulation of boundaries with the intent of creating undue advantage. Look, I know this is not sermon stuff, but this is this minister's nightmare stuff. Because if our country doesn't set election protection high up there, almost as important as inflation, I've heard there is a bipartisan group in the two houses of Congress working on such an order of protection. I hope and pray. And if you can inform me where I have been wrong about any of these matters, I'll add another column to our update titled, "This Minister Stands Corrected, Gladly." How can democracy not matter greatly in the coming election? Every important aspect of our lives depends on it, and our children's and grandchildren's future. I felt the same panic when I realized that an elected leader was trying to weaken NATO, making the sales pitch that the important thing was whether the countries in NATO were paying their fair share. A point, to be sure, but the point? The important thing for 3/4 of a century has been the peace that NATO has overseen and the freedoms that peace has afforded us, and increasingly in member countries. So much that contiguous countries are wanting in. I haven't heard of any wanting out. How could all that be overshadowed and possibly canceled out by disagreement over contribution levels? Two matters of social psychology have brought perspective and insight into the terrifying situation, to me anyway, and I know to some of you. The situation of the polarization that is contemporary America. If someone can make the case that some group, some other group, is getting more of the pie that should be coming to us, then groups hating each other and willing to act on that are readily formed. And that becomes more empowering and motivating than anything we may have in common. Protecting my group, protecting my minority, my group that seems to be becoming a minority, is a bigger deal than protecting our democracy. And speaking of my group, is it possible that these nightmare scenarios of what we are willing to delete to the dustbins of history, are brought on by fear of people of color, by fear of people who love differently? I think we still hear or need to FDR. The only thing we have to fear is fear. So for a long time now, almost half a century, we have been hearing that the demographics of our country are changing and people of color are having more babies. Now, I'm a little confused here. You may think I'm very confused here, but I think it's really Hispanic people who are having more babies, and Hispanic people are considered people of color. Somebody's got to explain that to me later. Anyway, that's our driving fear. How can it be? Last week, I read a story that I haven't been able to find to read you the whole story since. You probably know it, though. A sociologist in 1952 took two groups of young teen or preteen boys to a park in Oklahoma. I think the park place was called Robbers Creek or Cave. Now, does that much sound familiar to anybody? I'm sure some of you know this story. I've been wondering if I need to contact Google and say, give me material the Stuart UUs haven't heard about, but I know what their response would be. The groups were kept apart, these Rattlers and Eagles, teen or preteen boys. The groups were kept apart and told of the other's existence or presence in the park. And negative impressions of the other group were formed before they met. Then the groups were brought together and fists began to fly. Not quite West Side Story, but close. Then the leaders paired the groups in twos with a boy from each of the original two groups. The twos were given a task to work on together, tasks that affected the whole group. The end result was the groups of young boys felt differently about each other after they had worked on and accomplished something together. And the suggestion in what I read was, this polarized country of people, us, who are choosing to live in bubbles, media bubbles, suburb bubbles, social groups of like-minded only. The suggestion was, this country needs mandatory national service for all, like aged 18 to 20. So, it wasn't my idea, but I'm reporting it on to you. So we can't get into adulthood or the D or R party without having rubbed shoulders with people, looked into the eyes of and talked to and listened to people who were not in the same bubble we were in. We've got to talk to people from separate other bubbles. When you work with people who seem different, you learn the differences are superficial and you are more alike than you knew. Like FDR's CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, a mandatory national service. Schools have become bubbles, so something large is called for. We've got to do something big and bold to break through the polarization. It is leading to the death of democracy. In closing, we're coming up on a month that to me reeks of gratitude and reminds me that I should. It starts with All Saints' Day, November 1, a day Christian churches lift up for reasons I never understood. But I know who have been my saints and still are. And then Election Day. I have always been grateful for that and hope we can be again. And Veterans Day, reminding us that many, many people gave up so much so we wouldn't have to. And Thanksgiving. So many reminders that we had a lot of help to have what we have. And we don't want memory loss to jeopardize what belongs to all of us and our heirs. The closing hymn is 159. This is my song, 2 verses, 159. Those who are able, willing, feel free to stand. What was that?
Everybody knows the melody, but I think I have 3 verses here, so if you want to re-sing the first verse.
Well, wait a minute. What number is it? And how many verses?
It looks like my friend did it 3 times. We'll soon find out.
I've got 2 verses here.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for their lands are and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace, my lips and
Please be seated. And now for the closing words, as my partner up here extinguishes the light. These are from Sarah Moores Campbell, back of the hymnal. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown.